You hear it before you see anything. A sound that is not music and not silence, but something between the two. Low, constant, alive. The wind, it comes from the west, off the Pacific, across 10,000 miles of open ocean, where nothing slows it down. No continent, no mountain, no city, nothing. And then it hits Patagonia, and Patagonia hits back. 3 towers of granite rising 2,000 meters from the valley floor. A glacier 30 kilometers wide calving ice, the size of buildings into a lake, the color of something that shouldn't exist in nature. A puma walking a ridge at sunset as if the whole continent belongs to it, which, in every way that matters, it does. This is Patagonia. The place cartographers used to mark with the phrase that ended all certainty. Here be dragons. The place where the map runs out. The place that has been breaking people and making people for 500 years. And if you think you know what wild means, you don't. Not yet. Before we go any further, if this is what you came to YouTube for, real places, real scale, no filters, subscribe to Rome Folios right now. Every week we take you somewhere the world forgot to look at. This is one of those places. Don't miss what comes next. Let's start with the geography, because you cannot understand Patagonia without understanding where it is. Not just on the map, but in relation to everything else. Find South America on a globe. Now trace your finger down the western coast, past Santiago, past Puerto Montt, past the point where the continent starts to narrow and the Andes begin to fracture into islands and fjords and channels. Keep going. Past the 42nd parallel, where sailors for centuries called the winds the Roaring Forties, a name that understates the reality considerably. Past the 47th, the 49th, the 51st. Now stop. You are in Patagonia. A region without precise borders. Neither Argentina nor Chile draws a clean line around it, but generally understood to cover the southern third of South America. Roughly 1 million square kilometers of steppe, glacier, mountain, forest, fjord, and coast. To put that in perspective, it is larger than Texas and California combined, and it is home to fewer than 2 people per square kilometer. In most of it, far fewer than that. There are valleys in Patagonia where the nearest human being is 100 kilometers away. There are fjords in Chilean Patagonia where no road has ever been built and no road ever will be, where the only way to reach the communities that exist there is by boat or by small plane, where the people who live there measure time differently because the connection to the rest of the world arrives by sea and the sea has its own schedule. Patagonia is not remote in the way that word is usually used. It is not hard to get to, but worth it. It is remote in the original sense, distant from everything that human civilization considers normal. A place where the default state of the world, before settlements, before roads, before the particular noise of the modern, is still the loudest thing in the room. The Andes form the spine of it. Running north to south for the entire length of the continent, they are at their most dramatic here. Not their highest, not their widest, but their most elemental. In the north, the Andes are broad and volcanic and covered with snow and cloud forest. In Patagonia, they narrow and sharpen. The peaks become needles, granite needles thrust up by tectonic forces over millions of years, then carved by glaciers into the serrated, improbable shapes you see in every photograph of this place. Torres del Paine, Fitz Roy, The Cuernos. Shapes so specific, so unlike anything else on the planet, that they have become shorthand for an entire idea of wilderness. To the east of the Andes, the steppe, the Patagonian steppe, is one of the world's great underrated landscapes. It does not announce itself. It does not have towers of granite or walls of blue ice. It is flat or gently rolling in shades of gold and brown and gray, interrupted by the occasional volcanic plug rising from the plain like a broken tooth, and crossed by rivers that run turquoise from glacial melt. It is immense. Standing in the middle of it, you can see for 50 kilometers in every direction without encountering a single object taller than your knee. The sky above it is the biggest sky most people will ever stand under. Not the sky of the American West, which is wide but still bounded. A sky that seems to curve, that seems aware of its own scale, that makes the horizon feel like a destination rather than a limit. And the wind crosses it without interruption. We will come back to the wind. To the west of the Andes, the fjords. The Chilean side of Patagonia is a different country in every sense, but the political one. Where the Argentinian side is open and dry, the Chilean side is fractured and wet. The Pacific presses against the mountains, and the mountains break it into a labyrinth of channels, islands, archipelagos, and fjords that extends for over 1,000 kilometers from Puerto Montt in the north to Cape Horn in the south. This coastline has never been fully mapped. New channels are still being charted. There are places in this labyrinth where the water is 300 meters deep and the walls of the fjord on either side rise 600 meters straight up from the surface, and between them, the light filters down green and cold and strange. And the silence is so profound that you can hear the water against the hull of the boat and nothing else. This is where the southern right whale comes to feed, where the Commerson's dolphin black and white, small fast, rides the bow wave, where the condor, with a wingspan of 3 meters, finds the thermals that lift it above the peaks without a single beat of its enormous wings. Patagonia is not one place. It is 100 places compressed into a single name, and most people who go there see perhaps 3% of it. The rest remains, as it always has been, largely unknown. The history of Patagonia begins with a word. A Spanish word from the 16th century meaning, roughly, Bigfoot. It was given, or so the legend goes, by Ferdinand Magellan, who in 1520 became the first European to pass through the strait that now bears his name, and who reportedly encountered the indigenous Tehuelche people on the coast and was struck by their stature. Whether they were actually unusually tall, or whether the exhausted, malnourished crew of a ship that had been at sea for over a year simply perceived them as giants, we don't know. What we know is that the name stuck. Patagonia, the land of big feet. Magellan passed through here in October and November of 1520, navigating the channel between the mainland and the island of Tierra del Fuego in conditions that modern sailors still consider among the most demanding in the world. Winds that change direction without warning, currents that run against you, channels that narrow to a few hundred meters and then open unexpectedly into wide bays, rock that rises from the water with no warning. He made it through in 38 days. It remains one of the great navigational achievements in history. 50 years later, Francis Drake would follow the same route. Centuries after that, Charles Darwin, aboard the Beagle, would spend 5 years in these waters, observing, collecting, thinking, slowly assembling the ideas that would eventually become the most consequential scientific theory of the modern era. Darwin spent time in Tierra del Fuego. He observed the Yagan people, the southernmost human beings on Earth, living in conditions that European visitors considered incompatible with survival, wearing minimal clothing in temperatures that regularly dropped below freezing, diving into water that would kill most people in minutes. Navigating these channels in bark canoes with a skill and confidence that Darwin, to his credit, recognized as extraordinary. He brought 4 Yagan people back to England with him, an act that we now recognize as an expression of the colonialist assumptions of his time, and that ended, as such acts always ended, badly. The Yagan returned to Tierra del Fuego, changed and changing, and caught between 2 worlds that had no vocabulary for what had happened to them. The Yagan language is now spoken fluently by 1 living person. 1. Cristina Calderon, born in 1928, lives on Navarino Island in Chile and is the last native speaker of a language that her people spoke for thousands of years at the bottom of the world. She has spent decades working to document it, to record it, to pass it on. Whether it survives, her really survives, not as an archive but as a living thing, is uncertain. The Kaweskar are in a similar position. Once the great canoe people of the Western Channels, navigating the labyrinthine fjords of Chilean Patagonia with generations of accumulated knowledge that had no written form but needed none, they are now a few hundred people living in Puerto Natales and Puerto Eden. Their knowledge of these channels, the currents, the weather patterns, the places where the fish run and the places where the rocks hide, is knowledge that took thousands of years to accumulate. It is leaving with them. Before we go further, this is what Patagonia actually is, before you get to the photographs. A place of extraordinary natural beauty, yes, but also a place where the collision of worlds indigenous and European, human and geological, past and present, left marks that the landscape alone cannot show you. Now, the beauty, because it is real, and it deserves every word that has ever been spent on it. Torres del Paine. The name means Towers of Paine, Paine being the Tehuelche word for blue, a reference to the color of the lakes that surround the massif. 3 towers of Magellanic granite, formed over 12 million years by the intrusion of magma into softer sedimentary rock, then exposed by glacial erosion over the last 12,000 years as the ice retreated and left the harder granite standing. The towers are not the highest peaks in Patagonia. They are not even close to the highest. What makes them singular is their shape. 3 vertical columns of rock, almost perfectly cylindrical, rising from a base of sedimentary layers that create a horizontal band of color, gold and rust and gray, beneath the dark gray of the granite above. At sunrise, when the light catches the east face of the towers before it has touched anything else, the granite turns red. Not rust red, not orange. A specific, saturated, almost impossible red that lasts for perhaps 20 minutes and then softens to gold and then to the gray-white of midday. Photographers camp for days at the mirador above Lago Torres for a single clear sunrise. Many of them wait their entire trip and don't get it. The weather in Patagonia is not cooperative. Cloud builds around the towers at almost any time of day. The clear sunrise is a gift, not a given. And when the alarm goes off at 4 in the morning and you pull yourself out of a sleeping bag in a cold tent and walk 40 minutes in the dark to the viewpoint, and the sky is clear and the stars are still out and the first gray light is appearing in the east, you understand with your entire body why people spend thousands of dollars and weeks of their lives to be in this exact spot at this exact moment. Some landscapes you visit, Torres del Paine visits you. It stays in you. It reorganizes something internal that you couldn't have named before and can't quite name after. You carry it with you. In the same national park, Lago Nordenskiöld, a lake so precisely turquoise that first-time visitors sometimes mistake photographs of it for composites. For digital manipulation, the color comes from rock flour, finely ground glacial sediment suspended in the water, scattering the light at exactly the wavelength that produces that specific, impossible shade of blue-green. The lake is cold. The wind raises whitecaps on it most afternoons, and in the early morning, when the air is still and the surface is flat as glass, and the cuernos, the horns of sedimentary rock that rise behind the lake, are reflected perfectly in the water below, the lake looks like a mirror to a better version of the world. 250 kilometers to the northeast, in Argentina, the Perito Moreno Glacier is doing something that almost no glacier on Earth is doing right now. It is advancing. While the majority of the world's glaciers retreat in a warming climate, Perito Moreno continues to flow, fed by enough snowfall in the Andes to maintain its advance even as temperatures rise. It is not immune to change, but it is, for now, holding. And what it holds is extraordinary. 30 kilometers long, 5 kilometers wide at its face, 60 meters of ice rising from the surface of Lago Argentino, and another 170 meters below the waterline. 230 meters of ice, from top to bottom, blue ice, that specific compressed blue that only forms when ice has been under pressure for thousands of years. The blue of time, the blue of something the planet made without consulting us. You hear the glacier before you fully understand what you're hearing. A crack deep, resonant, like a rifle shot, amplified 100 times. Then silence. Then, sometimes, nothing. Then the collapse. A section of ice the size of an apartment building breaks from the face and falls. The sound arrives a beat after the image, the way thunder follows lightning. And the wave it sends across the lake reaches the observation deck where you're standing, and you feel it in your feet, in your chest, in the part of you that responds to scale before the brain has processed it. It happens dozens of times per day. Every time, it is new. Every time, the people on the walkway go quiet because some things demand silence, not as a social convention, as a biological response. North of Torres del Paine, on the Argentine side of the border, Fitz Roy watches over the town of El Chalten with the particular authority of a mountain that has been a destination for serious climbers for 60 years and still refuses to be considered conquered. The name Fitz Roy comes from Robert Fitz Roy, the captain of the Beagle, Darwin's commanding officer, the man who sailed these waters and named the peak during the 1833 survey. The Tehuelche had a better name, Chalten. Smoking mountain for the cloud that almost perpetually wraps the summit. Fitz Roy does not show itself easily. The summit is clear, on average, perhaps a few days a month. The rest of the time it is hidden partially, fully, dramatically, in a system of cloud and lenticular cap that the mountain seems to generate from within itself. Climbers have sat in base camp for 3 weeks waiting for a weather window. Some of them got one. Some of them went home having seen the mountain only from the lower trail, only in cloud, only as a suggestion of the shape they came for. And most of them say the same thing. Even partially hidden, even obscured, even frustrating Fitz Roy is one of the most impressive things they have ever stood beneath. Because what you can see, the lower walls, the granite buttresses rising from the valley, the ridgeline where the rock meets the cloud, is enough to understand the scale of what's hidden above. And imagination, in the presence of something this large, is almost more powerful than full visibility. The routes on Fitz Roy are some of the most demanding in the world. Not because of altitude, the summit is only 3,375 meters. but because of the rock, vertical, compact granite. With the addition of the Patagonian weather, which can change from clear to full storm in 30 minutes, and the wind, which at altitude can make progress on a face physically impossible. The first ascent was in 1952 by two French climbers, Lionel Terre and Guido Magnon, who spent 31 days on the mountain in what became one of the landmark ascents of the 20th century. Some of the hardest modern routes on the mountain have been climbed once by a single team, in a single perfect window, and not repeated. Fitz Roy earns everything it is given. And then there is the wind. We have been talking around it. Now we have to talk about it directly. Because the wind in Patagonia is not a weather condition. It is a presence. It is the defining fact of this landscape in a way that has no parallel in most people's experience of the natural world. The roaring 40s, the furious 50s, the screaming 60s. These are not metaphors invented by sailors trying to dramatize their experience. They are operational descriptions of bands of latitude in the southern hemisphere, where the westerly winds, unimpeded by any significant landmass between Patagonia and New Zealand, build to velocities that have no equivalent in the north. In Patagonia, sustained winds of 80 kilometers per hour are ordinary. 100 is unremarkable. 150 is a bad day, not an unusual one. There are places in the interior where the wind has blown at over 200 kilometers per hour, and the instruments measuring it were damaged before the peak was recorded. The wind shapes everything here. The vegetation first. Walk through the steppe near the Strait of Magellan and you will see trees, the few trees that survive this far south, growing at 45 degrees from vertical, bent permanently in the direction of the prevailing wind, their entire form a record of the force they have spent their lives resisting. They look tortured. They look like something is happening to them right now. And in a sense, it always is. The wind shapes the animals. The guanaco, the wild South American camelid that crosses the steppe in herds of hundreds, has evolved a physiological response to the wind. It turns its body broadside to the gust to slow down, or angles into it to accelerate. It reads the wind the way a sailor reads the sea, as information, as something to be used, rather than endured. The condor does the same. Those thermals, it rides the invisible columns of rising warm air that allow a 3-meter wingspan bird to soar for hours without effort, are created by the interaction of wind and terrain. The condor does not fight the wind. It builds its life around it. And the wind shapes the people. A gaucho who has spent 40 years on a Patagonian estancia has a specific relationship to the wind that is hard to describe to someone who has not experienced sustained gale force conditions as a daily fact. He does not lean into the wind as an act of drama. He leans because that is simply how you stand here. He can tell from the sound of the wind in the grass whether it is going to increase or drop. He can read the cloud formation on the mountain 30 kilometers away and know, with a reliability that no weather app can match, whether the next 6 hours will be workable or not. His cattle know the wind. His horses know the wind. The entire animal culture of the southern steppe is organized around a force of nature that, to the visitor, seems hostile and overwhelming and random, but to the people who live here is simply the first fact of existence. You do not fight the Patagonian wind. There is no winning that fight. You learn to live within it, or you leave. If you are still here and what you've seen so far is only the beginning, subscribe to Rome Folios right now. This is what we do. The full story, the full picture, the places that ask something of you. Hit subscribe and come with us every week. To understand who lives in Patagonia, who stays deliberately in one of the most demanding environments in the inhabited world, you have to go to the estancias. The estancias are the great sheep farms of the Patagonian steppe. Most of them were established in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, during the period when the governments of Argentina and Chile were actively encouraging settlement of the South, giving away land, sometimes in enormous parcels, to anyone willing to come and work it. Some of the earliest settlers were British, a diaspora of Scots and Welsh and English who came for the land and stayed for reasons that had less to do with economics and more to do with the particular appeal for certain kinds of people of a place that asked everything of you. Others were Croatian, German, Spanish, Italian immigrants who arrived in Buenos Aires or Valparaiso and kept moving south until they found land that no one else had claimed. And they built in conditions that should have been impossible, with timber floated down from the north, with corrugated iron for the roofs, because it was the only material that could be ordered and shipped and assembled without requiring skills that weren't available, with stone walls low enough to offer some shelter from the wind, with windbreaks of planted poplars that are, in many places, the only trees you will see for 100 kilometers. The estancias were not comfortable by the standards of anywhere else, but they were real. And the families that built them, the families that are still there, third and fourth generation, managing sheep and cattle on land that their great-grandparents broke by hand, have a relationship to this place that is unlike almost anything you encounter in the developed world. They are not here because it is convenient. They are not here because the economic calculation made sense. They are here because this is their land, not in the legal sense only. In the deeper sense, the sense in which a place gets into you and becomes part of how you understand yourself. The gaucho is the human expression of this relationship. The word comes from the Rio de la Plata region and has been applied over centuries to the skilled horsemen of the South American grasslands, the equivalents in some ways of the cowboy, though the comparison flattens something important. The Patagonian gaucho is not a romantic figure. He is not a symbol. He is a skilled professional in an industry that is physically demanding, logistically complex, and increasingly economically marginal, who does his work with the quiet, unhurried competence of someone who learned it from his father and intends to pass it on to his son. He can read a horse in the way that the horse's owner, who arrives from the city for 2 weeks in summer, simply cannot. He can find a lost sheep in a storm on a hillside he has never been on before. He can fix a fence post, a saddle, a water pump, a generator, a truck engine, not because he was trained to, but because the nearest mechanic is 4 hours away and the work doesn't wait. Self-sufficiency here is not a value. It is a necessity. And watching someone operate from that level of necessity with that matter-of-fact competence, with no drama and no performance, is one of the most quietly impressive things you can witness in Patagonia. There is also in the town of Gaiman, in the Chubut province of Argentine Patagonia, a Welsh community. 150 years ago, a group of Welsh settlers came to Patagonia specifically to escape English cultural dominance. They wanted to preserve their language, their traditions, their distinctness, and they did. Gaiman is a small town with Tudor-style houses, a tea house that serves Welsh cakes and scones, a chapel where the service is still held in Welsh, and a community that still speaks the language, not fluently in most cases, but consciously, deliberately, as an act of cultural preservation in a place so remote that the Welsh government has sent language teachers here to support the effort. It is a remarkable thing. A Welsh-speaking community at the bottom of Argentina, singing in the choir on a Saturday afternoon with the Patagonian wind coming under the door and the steppe stretching to the horizon outside the window. Patagonia does that. It collects the determined, the people who came here for whatever reason, from whatever starting point, and decided that this place, this specific, demanding, beautiful, brutal place, was worth the difficulty of staying. Now, the part that most travel documentaries about Patagonia leave out, or mention briefly at the end, almost as an obligation. The glaciers are leaving, not the Perito Moreno, which, as I said, is the exception, the one that is holding. The rest of them, the Patagonian icefield. The southern Patagonian icefield is the largest body of ice in the southern hemisphere outside Antarctica. It covers 13,000 square kilometers of the Andes, feeding dozens of major glaciers that flow east into the Argentine lakes and west into the Chilean fjords. It is retreating. Glacier Gray in Torres del Paine, a mass of ice that fills an entire valley, that calves icebergs into the lake below, that on clear days creates a horizon of white that seems to go on forever, has retreated more than 3 kilometers since measurements began. 3 kilometers. The markers are there, placed by scientists and park rangers, showing where the ice stood in 1960, in 1975, in 1990, in 2005, in 2015, each one further back than the last. Each one standing on bare rock that was under hundreds of meters of ice when your parents were young. Uppsala Glacier, one of the largest in the ice field, has retreated over 12 kilometers since 1968. 12 kilometers of ice, gone. The melt contributes to sea level rise. But in Patagonia, the more immediate consequence is the transformation of the landscape itself. Lakes that were fed by glaciers are changing. Rivers that ran turquoise from glacial flour are running clearer as the ice that fed them diminishes. The rock beneath is being exposed new rock, fresh rock, rock that has not seen daylight in 10,000 years, still unmarked by weather or lichen. It looks, in places, like a wound, a place where something was and is no longer. The scientists who work here measure and record with the precision their discipline requires. They are careful with conclusions. They speak in rates and projections and confidence intervals, but the numbers are clear. And the photographs, the simple, undramatic before and after photographs taken from the same spot in the same season, 50 years apart, tell a story that needs no interpretation. The ice is going. Faster in some places than others. Faster in recent decades than in the century before. Faster in some models than the most alarming projections of 15 years ago suggested. The Patagonian ice field will not disappear in our lifetimes. But the glaciers fed by it are already changed and changing, and the landscape that exists when the ice is fully gone will be a different landscape than the one that exists now. It will still be beautiful. Rock and lake and mountain and wind are beautiful without ice. But it will be different. And the thing that is lost, the ancient ice, the compressed time, the blue that only forms when something has been under pressure for thousands of years, that will not come back. Not on any timescale that has meaning for human beings. Not for our children's 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 children. We are watching something that took the planet 10,000 years to build, unmake, in the span of a single human lifetime. That is not politics. That is geology. And geology, unlike politics, does not change based on who is elected. Why does any of this matter to you? You are watching a YouTube video about a place at the bottom of the world. A place you may never visit. A place that exists, for most people, only as images on a screen. Why should Patagonia's glaciers, its people, its wind, its impossible light, why should any of it matter to someone sitting at home? Here is my answer. Because the world is not made of countries and borders and news cycles. It is made of places, specific, irreducible, extraordinary places that exist on their own terms, that were here before us, that have their own logic and their own beauty and their own way of measuring time. Patagonia is one of those places. And the fact that it exists, that somewhere on this planet, at this moment, 3 towers of granite are rising from a valley floor into a sky so clear and so large that it makes the word sky feel inadequate. That fact is not irrelevant to your life. It is part of what the world is. It is part of what is worth preserving, part of what is worth knowing about, part of what makes the human project this strange, troubled, extraordinary project of consciousness trying to understand the world it finds itself in worth continuing. At the end of every day in Patagonia, the light does something. It is not the golden hour of temperate latitudes, soft, warm, diffuse. It is something harder, lower latitude, cleaner atmosphere, the specific angle of the late southern sun. The light comes in nearly horizontal and hits the granite towers from the side, and the result is a color that painters have tried to capture for 100 years and that photography handles better, but still inadequately. A red that is not aggressive. A gold that is not warm. A light that seems to come from within the rock rather than from the sky. You stand at the mirador above Lago Torres in the last hour of the day, and the towers change color in front of you, red to gold to rose to gray to the deep, specific blue of Patagonian dusk, and you understand, without needing to articulate it, why people have been coming to this place for a century, and why they will keep coming for as long as it is here, not for the adventure, not for the accomplishment, for the encounter. The encounter with something so much larger and older and more indifferent than yourself that the self, for a moment, stops being the most important thing in the room. That is the gift Patagonia gives, and it gives it without condition. To the hiker on the trail and the gaucho on his horse and the scientist measuring the ice and the Kawascar elder whose people have known these channels for 3,000 years, to anyone who comes here willing to receive it. To anyone who comes here willing to be small. The map runs out here. It always has. But that is not the end of the story. That is where the story gets interesting. If this journey gave you something, share it with someone who needs to see the world this way. Subscribe to Rome Folios if you haven't already. And leave me a comment. Would you spend a week in Patagonia knowing what you know now? Because some places don't ask to be visited, they ask to be understood. Patagonia is one of them. I'll see you in the next one.